So long story short, for those of you who don't know, I used to work night shifts as a security guard at the local port. And it was haunted. Every night we had to go and do our patrol rounds around the whole perimeter and check every single office. The rounds usually lasted about an hour to an hour and 30 minutes, and the place was huge, 2-mile radius, and even with 2 of us on the rounds, it would still take us a while. So my co-worker Mike, the guy that was with me on my other experiences, had called in sick that night. So I went on my patrol rounds alone. As for the lieutenant, he stayed at the front gate post, watching his anime and cameras or whatever. And around 2 a.m. I had finished the outdoor round in the truck. Sometimes we also used a 4-wheeler or a bike even. So after finishing the outside round, I would have to go inside of every single building and check the offices to make sure no office employee stayed overnight and, in case there's an intruder or trespasser on the property. The buildings were really dark inside as well. The maintenance man would always shut off the breakers in the box right before he'd leave. Unfortunately, security did not have access to those keys. Therefore, I had to use my flashlights to light up the hallways in the offices. The offices alone were pretty creepy, and I would say haunted because of their old age. And the fact that I had to walk around those buildings alone in the dark really creeped me out. It's honestly so dead quiet in there that you could hear my steel-toe boots echoing through the hallways. Now, the next part is a blur because I began to get chills and hyperventilate, because as I'm walking through the dark office hallways, I began to hear a scratching-like sound on the walls right next to me. I stopped to listen, but the nail stopped as well. I thought it was probably just me, so I continued walking, and I stopped dead ahead in my tracks because the scratching sounds began to get louder this time. I knew right away that this was not normal because things like this have happened before in these places, and it's always really freaky. And I just came out of those offices too, so I could confirm that there was no one in there. I'm right in the middle of the building, with the nearest exit being quite a distance away on the other side of the building. But then, I hear pounding on the wall, and upon hearing this, I just begin to sprint out of the place with my adrenaline pumping. But the pounding followed me all the way to the end of the hallway, and once I got past it, it just stopped. I ran out of the building, and this put me on edge for the rest of the night. Like I said, when I entered another hallway, it stopped. But it sounded huge, and I tried calling it in to report it, but the phone signal in the offices was just complete trash. I actually didn't even bother to finish the round too, because I was going to pass out from anxiety, I think. So I went back to the front gate and I wrote a report on it. I had never written a report on my other experiences, but I was getting fed up with it now, so for the first time in my life, I actually wrote a report on the paranormal. No, I don't believe it was something logical because those punches were just unbelievably loud, and I know for a fact that there was nobody there. Plus, they were so loud that whatever was banging on the wall was definitely not human. I mean, I couldn't even stomp that loud if I tried, and I'm a pretty big dude. I weigh 227 pounds and I train in powerlifting, and there is just no way that that came from something human. This is a bit of a weird one, and I doubt anyone will believe this, and, that's fine, but an incident in a barn made the story real for a lot of people. Anyway, about 5 years after we built our house, I started seeing things in the basement. I'd see small creatures peeking out from behind furniture, and once even had a bat fly directly out of the bathroom at my face and then just disappear in mid-flight. But then, the guy showed up. I don't remember the first time I saw him, but I remember I'd walk into the basement at night and he'd just be there in the corner. He was really tall, very white, dressed in a longish coat and a black hat. He was sometimes holding what I think was a lantern. Basically, he looked like if a normal, very pale person put on the Babadook's clothes. He never did anything, he just kind of stood there and looked at you with this really serious and morose expression and then faded away into nothing or would disappear if you blinked or looked away. I never really told anyone, other than my mum, who is a firm believer in the paranormal, much more so than even me. But well, this one night, my punk band practiced in the garage, and we were all like 14 or 15 maybe. My drummer was sleeping over, and my parents were at a casino for the night. We crashed out on opposite sides of the wraparound couch in the basement after playing some video games, and then I woke up at around 3 a.m. And the drummer was gone. The back doors going into the backyard were wide open, and all of the lights were on. I was obviously pretty freaked out. I looked over all the house, and I couldn't find him anywhere. But then I noticed my new flip phone had moved. Sure enough, there was a call to a number that I didn't recognize. I figured that he must have gotten sick or something and had his parents come to get him. The next day I called him and he just was losing his mind. Apparently, he woke up, saw the tall guy in the corner, but said the guy put his arms out and lunged at him. He grabbed my phone, ran outside, and called his mum to pick him up. He came back in once a lot of lights were back on and put my phone back and then ran out and didn't even close the doors. So, now it got around school that my house is haunted. Fast forward a few years though, and the elderly lady who lived across the street had passed away, and the family were doing showings of the house to try and sell it. They had a huge barn behind the house as well as a field, and this family went into the barn and their little girl, maybe 5 or 7, pointed to a corner of the barn and described the exact guy from my basement. She apparently could see him, but nobody else could. She had never been on the property before, yet she saw the exact same thing. And that was the last that I ever heard or saw of him again. I woke up to something last night, and it sounded like my front door had been slammed shut. Initially, I thought it was a dream, as I'm a very vivid dreamer, but I'm certain that this was not the case. I don't remember what I was dreaming of, but when the door slammed shut, I was hurled into reality. Immediately, I scanned the room, trying to determine if this was in fact reality or just another weird dream. But then I saw my cat frozen in fear. His hair stood up like I had never seen before. His muscles flexed his deep claws into my thigh, and his back arched in a primal defense. And this terrified me. I knew that if he was truly scared, that I had a real reason to be as well, because I've always been told that animals can sense danger long before humans can. Finally, I examined the door, and I noticed that it swayed slowly, like it was breathing almost, like someone was standing on the other side trying to determine if I was still asleep. And then I could just barely see the silhouette of a man through the light of the cracked bedroom door. I held my breath as the door continued to breathe. I could literally hear my heart pumping its blood through my arteries, telling me to run, but I just refused to move, frozen now. I was completely paralyzed in fear, and I laid naked for many minutes watching the door, anticipating someone would burst through it. It felt like an eternity, but in this moment, my auditory senses were amplified. It was like my body just knew that this was a life or death situation, and it was scraping every last effort to increase my odds of survival. After the initial silence, I began to hear creaks outside my door, like someone was trying hard to move through my living room without awakening me. At this point, I knew I had no gun and no roommate in the house. I considered yelling in an attempt to frighten them away, but I was terrified that someone might respond. I legitimately thought that this was the moment where I would kill or be killed. I don't know how much longer I laid in bed, but eventually I mustered up the courage to check out every room in the house. I wielded the only defense that I had, which was my roommate's hot pink taser, and I checked every corner and closet, but I found no one. I still don't know what happened that night, but I'm certain my body was kicked into an evolutionary state because I and my cat truly believe that someone was inside my house. So, I just want to communicate with others about this and hear your thoughts as well, because I have to admit that I'm a bit shaken up. I'm looking after my friend's 3 little girls tonight while she works on an overnight shift. Technically, it was last night, as it's now 2:30 in the morning. Also, it's officially my 28th birthday, and it's one for the books, let me tell ya. So the girls are ages 5, 6, and 8, and my friend has a very long history of paranormal activity that started when she was a kid, and now her children are starting to have some experiences, and they're honestly just scared half to death. The 5-year-old was going on about her imaginary friend Summer tonight, who she's been talking about since she was 2. She says that Summer isn't really imaginary, she's real, she's just not alive. She describes her the exact same way every single time as well, and says that she likes wood. I have no idea why. My friend's daughter doesn't have an explanation for the wood thing either, which is weird. Anyway, she was talking to me about it tonight and said that she hasn't seen Summer in a long time and she's missing her and blah blah blah. Her older sister, 8, doesn't like to hear it because it freaks her out. I got them off the subject and played guitar for them, and all was well for a few hours. Then the 5-year-old looks out the window leading to the balcony and says that she sees a ghost. I, of course, just shrug it off, thinking it's just in her mind. The 6-year-old walks up to the window, turns around and looks me dead in the eyes with a look of horror that I've never seen on such a young child. The 8-year-old looks out the window and totally freezes. And so, I'm over here like, guys, you're getting yourselves worked up. And then I look out the window, and the expression, you look like you've seen a ghost, is exactly what I think my face looked like, because I was frozen. It was standing on the balcony across from us, and it was massive, like a giant almost. If that was just a person, they're the largest person on the planet, that's for sure. They were that big. I told the girls to back away quickly, and I went outside, and I couldn't really see much of the face, just the figure, and you could tell, though, that it was staring at us. 8-year-old comes back over, and I make up some story about shadows and stuff, and she's like, no, it's moving. And it was. It moved its arm and head in the most unnatural way that I've ever seen. Everything was just so wrong about it. My stomach was in knots, and I got the girls to go into the living room and went into mum mode, as they are my priority and I didn't have a second to worry about anything else. After they chilled, I kept going back to the window, and there it was, staring and moving its limbs just a little bit. Eventually, after quite some time, they fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie, and I snuck back out to check on things, and it's gone. It was just gone. I have no other way to say it. I must admit that sharing this with you guys just makes me feel so crazy, and I wish I had another adult with me to confirm what I saw, but I know what I saw, and it was there. There's no way it could have just been a neighbor or something. No way. It was way too big to be human, and it moved in a way that I've never seen a human move. It honestly sent just chills down my spine and really creeped me out. The 6-year-old woke up scared and is in the master bedroom sleeping now, and I'm sitting on this balcony staring at the balcony across from me, just waiting for this thing to reappear, and so far there's nothing. Nothing else happened, and nothing else needed to happen. I know what I saw, and it was like nothing that I've ever seen in my life. At this point, I know I'm going to be up all night. It made me so uncomfortable, and more importantly, I want to be aware of everything so I can protect the kids. I don't know, I feel just kind of crazy right now. If anyone can shed some light or just relate, that would be really good. Better yet, if you've seen a giant ghost, I'd sure love to know that I'm not alone. Also, my friend came home early from work and I haven't slept a wink. She's very, very scared, and I left out many details in my state of panic, but this one in particular is probably important. So, the 8-year-old, before we saw the figure, actually heard her mum's voice, who was at work at the time, coming from her sister's room. I thought that I heard it too, but I didn't want to freak her out, and so we let it go. And so I said ghost, but after I told my friend what we had seen, she immediately said it sounds like we could be dealing with a demon. What are your thoughts? When I was a child, I had an interesting life. I don't know if it's because I only remember it, but the paranormal side of things seems to be the most constant and prevalent thing out of my childhood. I hypothesize it's due to the depressing and hostile household that I grew up in. Everyone was dying or struggling, and fighting becoming a perfect blend for the paranormal to hit us, I suppose. But even with that, our family felt prone to the experience of these things. Something that I learned after my experiences, though, is that rumours within the family speculated something my grandpa's father brought about with him after the war, as he used to speak to himself and go down to the basement and fight with something, only to return with scratches down his back. But I can't exactly prove if this is true or not, so take that with a grain of salt. I believe that it has something to do with our Trinadian ancestry. Not that I know much about it, but I do know that Obeah was practiced amongst the slaves. But I'm getting off topic. I figured I'd provide backstory to my family, though. From my dad experiencing demons to my grandpa experiencing hellhounds and more, the only thing we all have in common is the hostile environments in which we brewed these vile things. Anyway, my experiences started sometime when I was around 6, I'd say, when my father first moved in with my new stepmom. I remember her security alarm randomly going off, or doors and such swinging open. I never saw a figure or thing within the house, but others apparently did. My father claimed he laid with who he thought was my stepmom, only to be something else. These events then picked up when we moved to another house. Very bad things happened to me there. It all started with me falling out of my bed in my sleep. This, of course, is what my parents told me, when in reality I was being pulled out of my bed with marks on my ankles. But writing this honestly gives me some major goosebumps. But then I started sleepwalking too, speaking in my sleep, etc. This all continued, and then I began seeing things. Eyes peering around the corner, simple things like that at first. Just to make matters worse though, the attic was actually in my room. Smack dab in the middle was the decrepit entrance, and my parents told stories of this which they didn't inform me about till many years later. One story of which was dreaming about being locked in there with something, only for it to come into fruition the next day. She climbed up and she got locked in somehow, and the light turned off. Really spooky stuff, and I understand why they didn't tell me it. The same stuff kept happening even when I went into my mother's house. I'd walk in my sleep and have horrible dreams which would make me have almost seizure-like effects as I dreamt and woke up. I remember one dream where I had a mist go around me and tongues were being spoken as I shaked in real life, even after I woke up. I admit that the dreams may be unrelated, but my gut tells me otherwise. Though some things happened, like doors opening and such, and it was mild compared to the other house, that's for sure. I remember one event, though, where I woke up screaming bloody murder, and I got out of bed and walked and felt like I was floating. As I walked out of my room, I had my first head-on encounter with this thing, this horrid creature. It kind of looked like a woman, I would say, stringy hair and missing her bottom jaw with guts hanging out where the lower half should be, and she let out the most horrific scream, and I just fainted. My parents allegedly ran out and grabbed me, claiming that I just stopped breathing and I was violently shaking. Then I remember waking up again, and then they told me to get to the couch and try and sleep. But obviously, there was no way that I was going to sleep that night. So I ended up just laying on my stomach and cried for a good hour, petrified of what I saw. After that, I did have some other minor experiences, but nothing really to write home about. But when we moved, it continued. It seemed like everywhere we moved, we brought this thing out of the woodwork and with us. When we first moved in and we were watching a movie in the basement, which was a dingy but not that creepy place, we were sitting in an attached room which we made into a man cave. We heard voices and footsteps, loud ones too, but clear as day, like someone broke in. So my father actually pulled out his pistol, so did my stepmom, and they checked the house, but there was nothing. No signs of entry and nobody there. Out of sheer panic, though, I grabbed my machete just in case, and they checked the property, looking back in the woods and everything, but there was nothing. We went back to sit down and continued watching the movie, The Lincoln Lawyer. I don't know, felt like I should add that. The one with Matthew McConaughey. And 10 or so minutes later, we heard it again, though much more faint this time. It was at that moment, too, that my father told me that we'd all be sleeping in the same room, and of course I happily obliged, not wanting to go back upstairs. A few months later, I was laying in my bed. My parents never let me shut the door either, so in front of me was a long hallway, 2 door frames and a staircase to their room. And as I dozed off, I shot up with a gut-wrenching feeling just engulfing my entire body as a figure with glowing eyes and a slim body stared at me from the furthest doorframe. I, of course, absolutely peaked and tried to go back to the bed thinking it was a nightmare. But I woke up again, and I'm not sure what time it was, but it was standing and staring at me from the halfway point now. I, of course, unable to do anything, just went back to bed and grasped the blankets over my head, scared. The next time, though, I woke up and looked at my clock first for some odd reason, and I guess hoping it was almost time for me to get up, almost as if some artificial number would stop this thing, but the time was 3:30. Which I later learned was the halfway point of the bewitching hour. And that thing was standing there in my doorframe. As I panicked and screamed, it let out what I think was a smile as I hurriedly covered my face in fear. I was about to die, I thought, gripping the blanket with all my might, hoping maybe it would just go away, and before I knew it, I saw a light gleaming through the holes of the blanket. Daytime had finally arrived, though the feeling of dread stuck with me for the rest of the day. That house, for a lack of a better term, was just really messed up. However, that's not the only memories that I have of there, because as I got older, I realized that I must have suppressed things which only came out as I got older. I remember that memory only emerged as I was watching The Conjuring, which almost sent me into a full-blown panic attack. And if anything else happened, I don't really know, and my parents kept most of that stuff hidden from me. Though as time goes by, I think I'm starting to gain more memories. As time went on, though, this stuff just went away with a mix of things like moving to a happier place and becoming a happier and less toxic household to me getting older, I guess. However, a few basic incidences happen, like feeling the energy of certain areas and seeing some basic stuff like a face and such, but nothing too bad though. Only a year ago, I was at my aunt's house, which has been home to many strange things, when the door slammed violently, shooting me up as pictures fell off the wall in the middle of the night, ironically at 3 a.m. I also had another experience where I was laying in bed when I felt like something sat on my bed violently, shooting me awake and watching my bathroom door slam open. As I went to walk out of my room, lightning actually struck. It might be unrelated, I don't know, but scared the crap out of me. Also, another time was when I lived in a little corner of the house and I woke up at night, 3 a.m. again, to have my curtains broken on top of me and this tall figure standing and just staring at me outside. Just stood there, and I did what I always do and tried to fall back to sleep. What's interesting about this tall and lean figure, though, is that it always seems to follow me, but only appear when I have really good days. Like, it doesn't want me to enjoy my life or something, but I'm not entirely sure. All in all, though, all of this stuff is just completely perplexing to me. A part of the reason why I'm sharing this is maybe to try and get some answers or theories or even other people's experiences. I'm also sharing this to maybe help someone feel not so alone as they go through some of the similar experiences I did. Anyways, please feel free to ask any questions below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for listening. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.